All right. Happy to meet you, Mr. Alex. Probably I'll start with a bit of an introduction of myself. My name is Hisham. I am an agile coach. I've about 15 years of experience. I've had the chance to work in different roles related to basically digital products. I worked in support, I worked in development, business analysis, data, product management, and then moved to processes. So I've been kind of all around the place, but similar problem context, sort of. I kind of also had the chance to work with different types of organization. I've worked with large MNCs. I've worked with governments, NGOs, and startups. So I've seen all types of mess that you can make. That's the, I think I have one more. All right. So I've recently, like just about a month ago, started this program where every week I pick a topic related to agility in general, and hopefully start a discussion. So see where that takes us. Hello, Muhi. I don't know if he hears us. Yeah, maybe Alex, if you want to introduce yourself.
I don't have as much experience as you. My goodness. A lot of reporting. But recently, in my positions, they've been asking me to gather requirements. What does it say? At one place, they wanted to start doing sprints, and not knowing, I'm like, we're gonna start running? They're like, no, it's agile, and we're gonna start doing an agile. And we have to do sprints, and I'm like, okay, let's hear. We have issues with this, and so we need to sprint to hurry to take care of these tasks. I'm like, do you know what we're doing? Because I mean, I've heard you have to have a scrum master. Scrum master leads things but does not interfere. Then you have a product owner. They work with the product owner, and they're working with the developers. Like, this can get complicated very fast, but we're just going to do a sprint. And so gotta keep hearing more and more about different things. Don't hog it up. I want to let Muhi talk too.
Fair enough. Mohi, are you with us? Can you hear us? I think you're on mute. Mohi. Mohi is an old colleague. He's worked with us. He's worked with me about 2 or 3 years ago in a startup. So I haven't spoken to him in a while, so it'd be interesting to also catch up. I think he has a problem with the setup, he says. He can hear, but he can't enable the microphone.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Fair enough, though. So you can hear us, Mohi. We'll basically start the discussion, and if that works out at any time, you can chip in. So today's discussion, what we wanted to cover is system thinking and as it relates to agility. So first, just to understand a bit about your context, Alex, are you working within, like, what type of industry are you working in?
So I've worked in talk on it. I've worked at a utility, Southern California Edison, and then I did at a Liberty Dental that was with Medicare and Medicaid programs. That's where I started hearing about the agility process, more of the sprints. I did a short contract with Apex Systems and a company, and they were using Jira, and they were using the Kanban with the board. Thank you. I always butcher the words. They were using the board, but they didn't have the scrum masters. They didn't have the sprints. At Liberty, they wanted to do the sprints, and but they didn't have the setup. Okay. Like some places where they're, like I said, the watching to use the Kanban board, where they're looking, and they don't have to interrupt their processes. At Edison, if an executive wanted something, everyone has to stop what they're doing, try and get the resources. They're not doing that. It's I don't want to bash them and say it's the art dark ages, but whereas when I saw people working with Jira, everything's loaded. If there's a problem, they can see the documentation, they can keep on going, they can look at the boards, what's priority. Uh-oh, did we lose Mohi?
Yeah, maybe he dropped out and he tried to connect again.
Oh. Whereas Liberty didn't have any setup to help them go. So that's my kind of experience. It's been all over the place, but not as refined as yours. That's pretty awesome.
I've been thrown in the deep end more time than I can.
That's awesome.
Hi.
So basically, I guess I can say I have the scars to prove it.
Whoa. Well, you
Uh,
can smile about it now. That's the good thing.
Yes, yeah. And I guess true grit is being able to smile at it at the moment. That would be that's the goal. So maybe just a short intro on agility, since I'm gathering you're not from software space. So I'll just try to position what agility is and what type of frameworks are, just so that we kind of have the same reference in a sense. First term is agility. What is agility? What is it to you? How has it been introduced?
The agile process, like I said, that they wanted the sprints where they
Okay.
had the short, but they didn't have that formal structure. They didn't have where I heard other places. You have the scrum master who is facilitating things,
Yeah.
seeing what you accomplished, what's the backlog, they didn't have that formal. That's huge.
Let's step away from the framework and the details. Just the
Yes,
word.
sir.
Just what does that mean to you?
Um, almost want to say a structured process crosses between project management and business analysis.
Okay. Let's see. Majur and Mohi, are you guys with us now? Can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Majur?
Mayuri. The J is a Y.
All right. Okay. Hi, Mayuri. We're just having a discussion. We're gonna mainly focus on system thinking, but at the beginning, we just want to have a quick intro on what agility is. Like if you step away from the details of framework or the details of the business you're in, just the word agility in English, what does that mean to you?
In terms of work, I'm not too sure, but I do know the definition of agile in terms of a sport related.
Okay.
So fast, quick are words which are probably lean is probably not related to this, but probably fast and quick might be the words I associate with the word agility, I guess.
Okay, that's interesting that you did mention lean.
Yeah, sorry. I think of more sport terms is where I've heard this term more often.
Fair enough. Let me I guess pull up
Mhm.
I usually use.
Yep.
And generally, when I like to talk about agility, I kind of like to contrast agility to lean, and basically explore both concepts at the same time. And now, in order to do it a bit quickly, so I'm just going to give you like a quick definition. See if that
Mhm.
works for you, and we can discuss afterwards. So,
Yeah.
agile, well, it can be tempting to think of it as fast, but if you think about, let's say, a train, and you compare a train to a motorcycle, you're going to be hard pressed to say that the train is more agile than a motorcycle, even though the train could be faster than the motorcycle. So, in a sense, every time you choose something to define agility with, chances are you might find some like outliers or extreme cases where the definition doesn't quite work. As far as I can find, the best definition for agility is the ability to respond to change. If the more able I am to respond to change, the more agile I am. regardless of the process that I have. So in the context of a transportation vehicle, I might change my mind about my destination. I might change my mind about my speed. I might change my mind about the type of terrain that I'm going to be traveling through. So a vehicle that allows me to change my mind at any one point would be more agile for my context, where the context is transportation. Now, if you look at the business, now I have certain requirements that are coming from different types of stakeholders, and these requirements might change. Now, if I'm able to respond to these changes and requirements, then I am more agile. If I am more strict about the type of changes that I allow, then by definition, I'm going to be a little bit less agile. Does that work as a definition for you?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Alex?
That was very simple but informative.
Okay. Now I'm gonna go to the basically the worst kept secret in the agile industry in general, that there is generally a trade-off between being lean and being agile. So let us start first by defining what does lean mean. Now, lean, if you're talking about, let's say, steak, a lean steak is a steak without fat. If we're talking about a person having a lean body means being fit, again, reducing fat. So in a sense, lean processes in general, they aim to reduce waste. Wherever there is wastage, we try to remove it. And that's basically lean thinking. We try to remove the waste as much as possible. Now, the worst kept secret, as I was mentioning, is that there is generally a trade-off, or there is some sort of tension between agility and lean. And I'll give you a very simple example that most of you have been through. Imagine you're going on a 5-day trip and you need to pack a bag. Now you have one strategy where you can say, okay, I know it's going to be sunny and I'm going to pack only the things that I need for sunny weather. Now you're being lean. You don't want to carry anything that you're not going to use. But what's going to happen once you reach there and it's raining? Now you're not prepared. So the more lean you are, the less prepared you're going to be to a change in your circumstances. Whereas if you start from the beginning by saying, no, I want to be ready for anything that happens. I might end up staying more than 5 days. I might have to stay for a month, or I might not have access to good food. Let me bring some food with me. Or there might be a change in weather. There are a lot of things that could change. I'm going to even pack up my medicine. I'm going to pack up extra stuff. If I'm trying to make sure that I'm able to respond to change once I reach my destination, by definition, I'm not going to be very lean. I'm going to have a lot of waste. That means I'm going to carry a lot of stuff with me to my destination that I'm not going to use because the condition for using it are not going to happen. And a lot of tension that you're going to see in organizations that are trying to basically implement some agile processes or some lean processes is that this tension is never discussed openly. It is kind of hidden or assumed in people's brain. So in a sense, when you have somebody pushing for agility, you will have somebody who's objecting to the agility, and they are only arguing about agility. But sometimes the reason, the objection is actually legitimate, but it's not coming from an agility perspective, it's coming from a lean perspective. Somebody is trying to respond to change because they are expecting to change to happen, and they're expecting it to have a lot of effect on the company. Whereas somebody else is more focused on how much waste, what's our operating cost, and that's the driver for most of their decisions. And the relationship is not really that simple, because sometimes you can say, okay, I want to be agile now. That means I'm going to be less lean. But what that does to you is that in the future, you're going to be less agile, because by wasting resources now, you'll have less resources in the future. So you have all these dimensions that play into your choice of whether you're able to respond to change now or in the future, or whether you're wasting resources now or in the future. Does this tension do you guys feel it in your organization or in your work?
I would say that a lot more people are like I said, when I was at the utility, um, they're leaning towards agility rather than lean. And on the other side, at the dental plan, they were trying to push more towards the agility. I mean, towards the lean. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a really good analogy. That's really good.
Yeah. So now if you're in a meeting and you see those tensions, just try to take a step back. Okay, what's the perspective of this person? Why is it that change is so important to them? And what is it about this other person? And why is it that wastage is more important to them? What is it about the context where they're working that makes their focus a lot more on one thing and not the other? So that's Agile in general. That's how it came in. Like the lean sort of came from manufacturing, but it is applicable everywhere. You don't want wastage in anything. And Agile also existed since a long time back, but there was more of an emphasis on lean processes earlier in the 1900s, mainly because most of the jobs were manufacturing jobs and most of the timelines were in years for projects. So in a sense, agility, the response to change, wasn't as critical. If you made sure that you had competent people on the ground in the factory and they get to see the process every day, they will fix the change without you necessarily teaching them how to respond to change, because they kind of live that process, and that process is kind of slow enough for them to see it build up and they can anticipate problems. So the focus was more on how can we be lean than how can we be agile. And then later into this century, once we started working with electronic devices, once most of the build up is hidden from us, we don't see our database growing, we don't see our code growing. A lot of stuff is actually hidden from our site. Lean processes became less important because we could build in the computer anytime we want. And ability to respond to change became much more important because now we're facing change at a much faster rate, and we need to be a little bit more, we need to have better standards on how we're gonna respond to change within the context of our work. So that's why you see from the 2000 going forward, agility started taking the forefront of the discussion in the enterprise world, because they find themselves always basically hit left and right with different changes. There are changes in the market, there are changes in your customer expectation, there are changes from your competitors, there are changes in your tools that you're using, that each organization normally would use at least a dozen tools that are built by maybe a dozen different companies. And each of these companies can make changes that could ultimately affect you. There could be an upgrade where you're forced to make changes to your own setup. So change became a reality. And now all these talk about, I want to have a plan, I want to have a forecast, what am I going to build over the next 18 months, over the next 5 years? They keep seeing it from one board meeting to the next, that whatever they forecast, it keeps changing. It's not happening. Change is the only constant, sort of, and they're feeling it a lot more. That's why agile framework are sort of popping up and becoming a bit more popular. Does it make sense so far?
Yes, it does. Yep.
All right. So now that we said why agile, because we want to respond to change. And why do we want to respond to change? Because we live now in a fast-paced society where change is a little bit more frequent. Then came in a bunch of practices. Like one of the first practices that existed were extreme programming. And extreme programming was basically sort of like an approach by programmers for programmers. And if you want to take it as a context outside of just software development, you can think of it as an approach by technical people for technical people. I'm a knowledge worker and I have certain expertise. There are a set of practices that could help me perform a little bit better. And that's what extreme programming tried to do. There was the concept of pair programming. There was the concept of maybe mob programming, working together. There were all types of practices that are technical in nature, but do not necessarily satisfy the curiosity of management, where they want to know when do things get done. Like this was not a question that was answered by XP. Extreme programmers sort of helped you become a better technical person, helped you produce better products, but they didn't necessarily answer the worries of a manager who basically has to pay the salary of the person or the team. Then came in basically Scrum. Scrum tried to allow the developers the space where they can develop their craft and get better at it. And if they choose to use practices from extreme programming, they can. But at the same time, it gave a layer for management where they can kind of have some sense of predictability. Because anybody who done knowledge work kind of knows that sometimes you face a problem, you only know when it's going to get solved when it does get solved. The idea of prediction about something you're facing for the first time that nobody else has faced before is kind of ludicrous in a sense. And yet, businesses do need that kind of reassurance. So Scrum, I view it as a sort of a compromise. It allowed the developers enough space to kind of work on their technical skills, but also gave the management a sense of direction. However, Scrum at the beginning was only focused at one team working on one product, and that's what it was designed for. Whereas when you move to the enterprise, at the beginning, people were left to their own devices, so people had to figure out things on their own. That was, you could argue that's a plus for Scrum because it allows you to come up with the answer. But if you can't find the answer, then that wasn't a very what's it called? That wasn't a very reassuring fact. That's why people moved into scaling agile type of frameworks. That's where, for example, SAFe come in and other type of or less or other type of framework that kind of focus on the idea of having a bunch of teams working together in order to develop something. Now, in essence, they are all trying to basically build in this capability to become better at responding to change. That is the ultimate goal. Each framework kind of focuses. Scrum tries to do it at the team level. SAFe has to do it at the enterprise level. But I would argue that one thing that they both do that's not necessarily always good is that they have a philosophy where they have a set of practices, and the guideline is apply those practices. Then you will understand why those practices are relevant or why they are useful, or even how to do them better. So apply first, understand later. That is probably the main weakness you will have with all these frameworks. It's reassuring you can start faster. The moment a company decides they want to do SAFe or they want to do Scrum, they can launch it right away. They can have a bunch of trainings for people to become certified in Scrum or certified in SAFe, and then they can just organize into teams, and they can have a PO, they can have a Scrum Master or a team coach, and they say, we're done. We can do agility now. But that's just the start. Like, that's just you applying their practices, but understanding is still a very long road. And a lot of companies basically get very happy once they do the implementation at the beginning, but then the rewards are a little bit taking a lot longer than anticipated. And that's what gets people a little bit more worried. Okay, and that's why basically I was trying to have a conversation about system thinking. I was trying to go back to the principles, both SAFe and Scrum and all the other frameworks are kind of basing their thoughts or their practices on some first principles. Things like system thinking, things like theory of constraints, things like theory of flow. These are all the things that feed in to the decisions made by these frameworks. However, these frameworks don't tell you about these principles. They just start right away by applying the framework itself. So if the picture so far is clear, I can use the second half of the hour to dive into system thinking itself. But for now, let me just hear from you. What do you think of this? Any thoughts?
So, Mayuri? Am I butchering that?
Yeah.
You almost
Oh,
said Fury.
Muri, thank you. So she came in with the sports analogy, the sports of fast, lean. I know, but that's good because it goes back to what you were saying about the companies. They don't have the people. They get the people. They're super happy. They want the implementation, but you have to understand, and they want you to go to the original analogy. You can have all the great players out there. You can have a good fielder, a good soccer player out there, but if they don't understand their roles, if they don't understand what's going on, you're not going to function well. You do have a so it's starting to slowly sink in. I'm going back to your analogies that both of you guys used, and it's really good. It's really good.
okay. Thank you, Alice. Mayuri, do you have any thoughts?
I think I'm starting to understand this because I'm completely new to this whole concept, and I think I'm getting there. I'm understanding bit by bit, and these analogies really do help me understand it. So yeah.
Well, one thing that's really good about frameworks that are relatively popular is that a lot of thought went to the actual names. So in a lot of cases, you can get a lot more benefit by simply analyzing the English meaning of the name than you would reading a lecture about that particular framework. Like just the fact that they use flow. Okay, what does flow mean? uh, like thinking about it in terms of like something flowing from one thing to the other can actually help you a lot more sometimes than having a lecture that says, oh, how to apply flow in an organization. The same for lean, the same for agility. It just takes you back because a lot of people arguably sat down and once they had this concept, they were trying to think of a word that best describes this concept. And then they came up with this word and it stuck and it became popular. So that in itself kind of can guide you to better understand what is it that they're talking about. Sometimes if we dive into the details, we basically see the trees, but we don't see the forest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So then let's see what is this system thinking. Has anybody heard of system thinking? Are you familiar with it?
No.
System thinking.
Yeah. So in essence, basically, there is one way we're used to basically thinking about stuff. And our mode of thinking that we're most trained of is called analysis. That means if I see something, for example, I see a phone, the way that I understand this phone is by picking it apart. What I do is I look, oh, there is a screen, or there is a battery, or there is a camera, or there is a mic, or there is a plug, a UX plug. So I try to basically break it into parts. I understand the parts, and then basically I will hopefully understand how the whole phone kind of works. Does that seem familiar? This is the way we mostly think about things. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a way, yes.
Like think about, for example, an MBA at the university. So they're trying to teach business to people. And what they do is they're like, okay, we have this part called HR, and we're going to teach you HR. We have this part called finance, and we're going to teach you finance. We have this part called marketing, and we're going to teach you marketing. We have this part called supply chain, and we're going to teach you supply chain. And then hopefully you're going to be able to kind of group everything together and understand what business is in general. You can kind of see this in everything. Like we have a part of the universe that we call physics. We have another part of the universe that we call chemistry. We have another part of the universe that we call biology. And you can basically we're picking up the universe, we're picking apart, we're diving deeper into it. And hopefully we say that if we have enough understanding of the part, we'll understand the whole a little bit better. That's the essence of analysis type of thinking. You break things apart, you understand the part, and then hopefully that kind of helps you understand the whole. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Sure. Now there is a limitation to this type of thinking, and that's something we are starting to find out. Maybe one famous example is from the US. The most popular type of car that was manufactured in the after the Second World War. The most popular type of vehicle that was manufactured was a six-seater, six-passenger car, right? Whereas right now, the most popular type of car that is being built is a four-passenger car. Now, if you take the car from the 1950s and you take the car from right now, no matter how much analysis you do, you can never find out why the six-seater was the most popular car. Why was it built? Why would we build six-seaters in the 1950s? And why are we building four-seaters right now? No amount of inspection into the car, into how it's built, into how the parts are kind of fixed together will ever help you answer that question. Because the answer to this question lies outside of the part that I'm trying to understand. Now, in the 1950s, the average size of a family was around 5.6. So six-seater made sense. Whereas the average size of a family in the US right now is about 3.2, something like that. So four-seaters made more sense. So in a sense, we found that we are facing a lot of problems where the answer to them does not lie inside the part, they lie outside the part we are investigating. So in a sense, if you're facing a problem in your business, it's very rarely an HR problem or a marketing problem or an operation problem. In a sense, it is a problem that's going to require a bunch of stuff in order to solve it, but it's not one facet of it. Because each problem you face in your business, if you bring in an HR personnel, then they're going to give you a way to solve it from an HR perspective. If you bring in a marketing guy, they're going to give you a way to solve it from a marketing perspective, but none of them are necessarily going to solve the actual problem. They're just going to solve their impression of it, in a sense. Sort of like if you remember the six blind men and the elephant. You familiar with the story? So six blind men basically were touching the elephant and trying to figure out what it looks like. And one of them touched the I don't know what's this called. And he said the elephant is like a spear. One of it touched the long nose and said the elephant is like a rope. One of it touched the stomach and he said the elephant is like a wall. So in a lot of ways, we basically describe the word based on our impression of it rather than its actual function. So systemic thinking, now, okay, so one way of thinking is analysis. The other way of thinking is synthesis. Now, synthesis, what it does is when I have a phone and I'm trying to use synthetic thinking in order to think about the phone, the first thing that I see is what is the system that this phone is part of. So this is part of like a communication system. It helps us communicate. I don't look at the parts or what's in it. I just look at where is it in the system and what does it help me to do? It actually helps me to basically forward calls and receive calls. So that's its function within that larger system. So I first, in order to understand the phone better, I first understand the whole. I understand what does communication in general mean. And then basically I understand where does the contribution of the phone fit within that whole system. So it's a different type of approach. You start from the outside and then you dive in, as opposed to basically starting with the part and then grouping them. Make sense? Okay, so now we're gonna dive into basically like 3 guidelines for system. But before that, in order to know that we have a system, there is one key definition that we need to worry about. The whole system must be delivering value that no part of the system can deliver independently. Now, let me explain this in like basically simpler words, I guess. Suppose I have a company. Now, company is made of many departments. I'm going to have an HR department. I'm going to have a marketing department. I'm going to have an operation department. Now, and the legal department. Now, if it is the case that no single department can produce value by themselves, if the work of any single department can affect the whole system, then we can say that, okay, we have a system. We require the entire company, we require all parts in order to deliver the value that the company delivers, but no single part of our system is able to deliver that value by itself. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a sense, one form of analysis could be if you have a situation in a company where you have two departments that are each basically delivering value independently of each other. Like they have their own revenue, they're handling their own processes. So that means you could potentially have a situation where inside one company, I have two systems and not just one. So it's very important to be aware, do you have one system? Or because if you don't have one system, then trying to use synthesis analysis is not going to be a good thing because, well, what that department does not really affect me. It has to be that what that department does affect me. We're all in it together. That's when you say, okay, we exist in a system, then that means let's use system thinking. So that's the key thing to start with as a definition. And then we basically, if we decided that we are in a system, then we dive in and have a bunch of rules about how to go about it. Does it make sense so far? Okay. So rule number one, improving the components of the system does not necessarily improve the system. And let's again use just common language for this. Let's take the example of a car. So if I have a car and the car has 4 wheels, if I'm in charge of basically the left back wheel, so this wheel, I'm the one in charge of it, and I work really hard in order to make this wheel faster, right? The other wheels, I don't care about. They're not my problem. They're some other department's problem. So I care about this wheel. I make this wheel faster. What happens to the whole car? Does it become faster?
No.
Chances are it becomes less stable, right? Now it has one wheel that's faster than the other wheel, so it's not really a fun car to drive anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's kind of counterintuitive that sometimes we focus on the component we live in. I live in HR, and I basically try to make HR the best HR possible. But the best HR possible does not necessarily mean the best company possible. And sometimes I live in operation, and I try to make the operation the best quality possible, the best operation possible. But the best operation possible does not necessarily mean the best company possible. So the first rule of system thinking is that improving one component in isolation does not guarantee an improvement of the system. As a matter of fact, just like statistics is against you, it's more likely to affect the system negatively because there are more ways for you to fail than there are ways for you to succeed. So the rule for improvements, if you're using systemic thinking, is that you only improve the part if it also improves the whole. So I will only improve HR if my improvement also improves the company. And I have to always keep in mind, I have to be able to show both or I do neither. So I work in operation and I want to improve operation. I have to show that improving operation also improves the company. If I'm not able to do that, then it's better not to do anything. Because I don't know if my improvement in operation will necessarily translate it to an improvement in the company. Now, maybe another example is, let's say you have a house and let's take the kitchen. A kitchen is a part of a house. So would you argue that a bigger kitchen is better or worse? If I make the kitchen bigger, is that an improvement of the kitchen?
For the kitchen itself, probably,
Right?
yeah.
Arguably, it's an improvement. But what if the entire house is just a kitchen? Because I made the kitchen so big, there is no room for anything else. Is that a good house?
No, it's not.
Right? So improving the kitchen is okay as a goal, so long as it also improves the house. The moment one improvement in the kitchen start making the house worse is the moment I should stop. Because my objective is not to make good kitchens. My objective is to have good houses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So if we take, for example, Agile, they have this concept of cross-functional teams. And the idea is that you want a team of different skills working together in order to deliver value. Now, a quick definition of what a real cross-functional team is, it's not just to have a random selection of different skills. It's actually having inside the team all the skills necessary in order to deliver actual value. So if in your context, that means you need a developer, you need a tester, you need a designer, and you need an analyst, and maybe a marketing guy, then that's your cross-functional team. If in your context, it means you need a builder, you need a carpenter, you need an architect, and a designer, then for your context, that's your cross-functional team. The criteria for identifying whether you have a cross-functional team or not is if you have all the skills necessary to build that product and deliver value to the customer inside that team. If you have that, you're in a good position. If you don't, then you're not. And the reason they come up with this definition, it goes back to basically system thinking. Because generally, every company has a business department, they have an engineering department, hardware, software, some QA, and some operations, and all of them are needed in order to develop value. Now, the problem when you divide them into silos like this is you have an expert in business who's basically coming up with all these portfolios, initiatives, and these kind of things. You have experts in system engineering who are like designing the architecture and all of that, experts in hardware. So you'll have experts in each silo, but having the best business department does not necessarily mean you deliver the best product. Having the best hardware department does not necessarily mean you have the best product. So what you do is you make one team that has enough business competence, enough system engineering competence, enough hardware competence, enough software competence, test and QA, and operation, all the competence required inside one team that can deliver value, and they work closely together because at any point, operation can give feedback to business, operation can give feedback to system engineering, and vice versa. Every skill set can give feedback to every other skill set, and together, once that interaction is allowed inside, once you create an environment with that type of interaction is allowed and encouraged, that's when you create a good product at the end. Whereas if you have silos, you will always have people who want to become better at the business analysis. You will have people who want to become better at the architecture of the system. You will have people who want to be better at the operation or the sales or the marketing. So, and that's sometimes counterintuitive because if they become better at those things, it doesn't necessarily help the company at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's principle number one. Improving the part does not necessarily improve the whole. All right. And if you want to basically improve a part, the rule is you can only improve the part if it also improves the whole. Now let's move on to the second principle. Improvements must be directed to the things that we want and not the things that we don't want. Like if you know Edward Deming from quality, he has a saying, you cannot inspect quality into a system. That means I can't build a system and have somebody at the end do a check and then assume that that means I'm going to be producing quality system, quality product. Does this concept make sense to you or?
Yeah, it does. Yep.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah. No good time. Got it.
Because I can give you an example that's a little bit from the software world, where this kind of fits in. So in the software world, a lot of times you have a situation where somebody writes a code, and at the end there is a test that's run, and if the test kind of passes, then it automatically is released to the client. If the test fails, then it's not released to the client. And they think that that's quality. That is the whole of quality. You will find somebody whose job is just to sit in the tester seat, and their job is just to run that inspection. And if basically their test passes, they say okay. If their test fails, then they say no. Now, this approach is called inspection. And inspection is important, but inspection by itself is not quality. And I'll tell you why. So the example I usually bring up is, supposing you have a mobile application that has one screen, and this screen has about like 4 actions that you can do. So we can argue that basically there are 4 potential tests that you can run on one screen. That makes sense, right? You can run tests on the first action, second, third, or fourth. Now, if you have 2 screens and they each have 4 actions, then the number of tests you can do is basically 4 by 4. 4 times 4, that's 16, because you can do the first and any of the fourth, and you can do the second and any of the second 4, and you can do the third. So each of the ones in the first, you can do 4 with. So that's 4 by 4. And you can run the numbers yourself if you want, but the moment you reach to basically 5 screens, each of them has just 4 actions, you already reach about 1,000 test cases. That's only 5 screens. If you reach 10 screens, that's 1 million test cases. If you reach 15 screens, that's 1 billion. If you reach 20, that's 1,000 billion, 1 trillion. So every 5 additional screens that you add multiplies the number of required tests by 1,000, by a factor of 1,000. So, and imagine just any normal application that you have out there, how many screens do they have, and how many actions in each screen they have. So any useful application potentially has billions of tests that you could do. And obviously no company in the world can afford to run all these tests. So when you do quality by inspection, what you're in fact doing is you're testing a small subset of the entire test that you could do, set of tests that you can do. You're making sure that this small subset is okay, is working. And by that, you infer that the whole system is working, which doesn't make any sense. Like there is no logical link between just the fact that I'm looking at this small part and that it is fixed does not mean that the whole thing is also good and fixed. So if you focus on the things that you don't want, that means you say, I don't want defects. So what you do is you add an inspection criteria in your process where somebody just looks at it and say, oh, this is a defect, we don't want it, remove it. But what you actually want is you want to focus on what you want. That forces you to have a definition of what quality is. What is the purpose that this thing must serve? How is it serving it? What are the criteria that it's serving it as? And you will have steps along the way to always confirm that when I'm building it with that purpose in mind. So I don't wait until the end where I test that purpose. No, that purpose is kind of understood in every step of the way, and everybody in every action that they're making, they're thinking in their mind, how does this action affect that purpose? Now, if you do that, then yeah, you plus the inspection. We're not saying the inspection is not important, but you do that plus the inspection, you have a good quality. But if you don't do that, you even sometimes don't tell the worker what's the purpose of the thing that they're building is. They're just doing one thing that they're skilled at, but they don't know what its purpose is. Then what happens is you're forced to put something at the end where it's an inspection. And that never really gets you good quality. It just tells you that I can't find a defect. That's all the information you get. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
All right. I know I kind of rushed the whole thing, I guess. Yeah, you were saying something, Alex? You're on mute.
My internet connection went a little because
Oh.
you froze. That was on my side.
Fair enough. Okay. But did you hear the last part? Okay.
Yes, I did. Yes.
So then we move on to the third principle. Continuous improvement sometimes requires discontinuous improvement. And the simple example here is there is, I think, a quote by Ford where he said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said, we want faster horses. So there is no incremental improvement that gets you from a horse to a car. So you can incrementally improve the horse so it's faster. You can incrementally treat it better, feed it better. You can even breed it better until you get the best possible horse that you could get. But at some point, if you want to get to the next level, you might have to abandon the whole technology that you were using. So horses have a ceiling. At some point, you're going to start using cars. And the same way in business, you're going to use a tool. There will come a time where that tool can no longer be incrementally improved. There will be a need for a serious disconnect if you want to keep improving. And if we admit that that's a fact, no matter how smart we are, no matter how well thought out our tools are, there will come a point where these tools can no longer be incrementally improved. That means we know there will come a time when we have to actually completely remove it. That means now we have an objective. Whenever we design a system, we must design a system where it's easy to basically change parts, because we know we will have to change them. You have as an objective, not just building a part that's the best possible, because that just maybe solves today's problem if you're able to deliver it today. But if you want to think about the future, then you want to build something that's easy to replace, because whether you want it or not, there will come a time where you will need to replace it. So keep in mind that in order to keep improving, there will come a time where you have to have a discontinuous step. So whenever you're designing a process or a system, design it so that it allows that discontinuous step, not make it extremely hard. Because if you make it hard, then the entire basically system is going to fight against that change, and that change is not going to happen. And then you as a company are going to die in the end. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell, short introduction of system thinking. Any thoughts? Was it useful?
That was great. Love the analogies. Thank you for simplifying it so much and going over it again and again. So it went through. I have to get going. Not have another engagement, but for anything, thank you for taking this time. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
I wish more people were here to hear your great stuff. But
Thank you. I'm here every Thursday, so you're free to join anytime. Thursday,
Okay.
same time and same link. So anytime you guys wanna join, you're welcome. More than welcome. Each time we're gonna choose a different.
Thank you. Thank you. If I don't hear from you, I hope you both have a very good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
How
Bye.
about you, Mayur?
I actually found this very useful because I'm completely new to this concept, and I just want to start learning about this, and your analogies made it very, very easy to understand. So honestly, thank you so much. I found this very, very helpful.
Sure, you're more than welcome. Tell a friend, I guess.
Of course, I think I will.
We're meeting again, and you're more than welcome to join. If you have any specific topic that you're curious about, you can just message me, and maybe I'll basically address it in one of the future sessions.
Perfect. That sounds good. Thank you.
Right. Have a nice day, Mario.
You too. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.